Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Sin and Tonic. Today's story is that of the Facebook killer and the tragic murder of 17-year-old Ashleigh Hall. Let's go. Sin and Tonic! Today's story takes place in County Durham. It's up near Newcastle. Didn't know, had to Google it, but now I know. Ashleigh Hall was 17 at the time of our story. She was the eldest of 4 siblings and she was very helpful around the home. Her mum would describe her as her rock. They were very close. She helped look after the younger children. She helped around the house doing housework and things like that. She sounds like she was a very conscientious, lovely, kind girl. It's always sad in every case and it's always really tragic. Most of the cases that I cover, the victims are, I think, always, well, no one deserves to die, do they, or be murdered or anything like that, but yeah, innocent victims. And for some reason though, looking at her little face in the pictures, it's just, yeah, it really got to me, this one. She just seems really sweet. Ashleigh was studying childcare at Darlington College. That sounds so posh, doesn't it? Darlington. And her ambition was to become like a nursery school teacher, nursery worker, something like that. She was a very normal teenager, phone to face, similar to last week when we spoke about Paige Doherty. As with many normal teenagers, Facebook would feature heavily in Ashleigh's life. It is an amazing platform to meet people, but also to reconnect with old friends and things like that. Because I'm old, that's what I would use it for. Like, oh, I haven't seen them since, oh my God, I was 16. Wow, oh, look at them. You know, get a little insight into people's lives. You can do a bit of Facebook stalking if you so wish. Never done that. Never. Oh, chin chin. Anyway, for a teenager, I imagine it's a great way to be in touch with your friends after school and share your life and what you're doing and blah, 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 like everyone else does. We all put all our good stuff on social media, don't we? She was no different. In October of 2009, Ashleigh received a friend request from somebody called Peter Cartwright. Now, this dude had, I'll share a picture, no top on, so topless, handsome. He said he was 17 years old and so was she, so great. And he showed a great interest in Ashleigh and their relationship would blossom online. They would talk every single evening on Facebook Messenger. He was also like a DJ and his account did not look fake or weird or suspicious in any way. At first glance, not at all. He had friends on it, so there was like 3,000 or so friends. He had loads of pictures of himself on his page, because sometimes like a troll page will just be like someone's profile picture and a name and they've got no friends, no photos. It's just like a weird, like a dummy page. The only thing that was slightly odd that Ashleigh, like the first red flag I would say, was that he had no mutual friends. So like it's like he's just popped out of thin air. They don't know anybody mutually. So that's a little odd. That would be an alarm bell for me, but I'm not 17 years old. And this was also in 2009. I do feel like we're here in 2021 and I would like to think and hope to think that being online and online safety is more prominent now, but I could be wrong. At the end of the day, any young person is a vulnerable person, aren't they? Like I've said, frontal lobe or whatever lobe it is isn't fully developed till you're 25. So we have to remember that, like these kids, they're not fully developed and we all make mistakes. Unfortunately, for some young people, that costs them their lives. Things started to like heat up over a couple of days. They started to put kisses on the end of their messages to each other. Loads of kisses. She would go to college and tell her friends all about this. She would show her friends his profile and his Facebook and just be like, look at this guy, like this fitty, he's like flirting with me, we're talking every night. She was so excited and so happy. She didn't have much luck with boys at college or at school. She hadn't ever had a boyfriend before. Her friends would say that she suffered with really low self-esteem. So this relationship that she'd started with Pete had really lifted her. He was really complimentary of her, flirty, just kind and nice to her, and bigged her up. So that really lifted Ashleigh. As the days went on, they would share lots of information about each other to each other. He was a DJ, so he was known as DJ Pete, DGP, with like some numbers at the end. I think his like Facebook would be like DJ Pete 6060 or something like that. I'll find it, I'll share it. After a little while, they discussed meeting. He asked if they could meet up, and that was due to be on the 25th of October in 2009. Here is my second red flag. He said, could she or would she be happy to stay at his house? Now, she's never met this guy before, and it's a bit, well, like, you know, first time you're, this isn't adults, this is kids, like the first time you're meeting this lad, and he's like, do you want to stay over at my place? Like, I think that's just a bit odd. That would make me be a bit cautious. I'm not blaming her at all for making a decision. She was very, very excited, very, very, very happy to be having this relationship with Pete. So yeah, she was really caught up in it. So yeah, but I think I am quite a nervous, anxious person. So I'd be like, oh, I don't know about that, mate. But we're all different. The plan was, stay at mine, let's meet, you stay at mine, get to know each other, meet each other, stay over, and my dad will drive you home the next day. That was their plan. And Ashleigh was incredibly excited about this. In that week leading up to it, Ashleigh went to college and she was just telling all of her friends about it. She was just so happy that she was finally going to meet Pete. I don't think they've been talking that long, so I say finally, but you know, a day can feel like forever when you're 17 and you're in love, and it's, you know, just the best thing ever, isn't it? She was so happy that she was going to get to meet him. Here is my next red flag, alarm bell, boom, 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 going off all over the gaff in this story. The morning they were due to meet, Pete messaged Ashleigh and said, is it all right if my dad comes to pick you up? Actually, is it okay if he comes and gets you, brings you to my house? I don't drive, and yeah, you know, rather than give you my address and you make your own way here, my dad said he'll come and pick you up. Again, she doesn't know this. It's just, it has you on the edge of your seat, doesn't it? Because you're like, what? No. And it's horrible because she is just a vulnerable freaking child. Let's be real. Her family would say that on the day, it was a Sunday, the 25th of October, that she was incredibly happy that day. She was getting herself ready. She was packing her bag. She was in a very, very good mood. Her mum didn't know what was going on. She didn't know about Pete. So she asked her mum about 7:30 in the evening if she could go on a sleepover at a friend's house. She normally would have had college on the Monday, but it was the October half term, so no college. She could be a bit more free with her routine, and her mum was like, yeah, you can go and stay at a friend's house, but you must be home by lunchtime tomorrow. That was the rule. She runs upstairs, she's so happy, she's like, yes, you know, she's got her ticket. We've all done things like that. You tell your mum that you're going to go and stay at a friend's house and you end up on a golf course in a tent puking up vodka. Am I right? Again, you're not fully formed. That evening, while she's upstairs waiting for Pete's dad to come and collect her, she gets a text message, and this text message is from an unknown number, and it turns out this is Pete's dad. Here's the text, I'm going to read it to you. It says, hi Han, it's Pete's dad. Are you sure you don't mind me picking you up? ? Pete is really looking forward to seeing you, and yes, it's okay for you to stay. This is her reply to Pete's dad. No, it's fine. I don't mind. I trust him, so I trust you, and thank you. Then she receives a message from Pete. My dad's on his way, babe. He says excuse the state of him, laugh out loud. He doesn't have to come in and meet your mum, does he? Laugh out loud. He'll be a mess, probably, laugh out loud. Obviously, that's LOL, but I'm saying laugh out loud. Oh, and are you wearing some sexy underwear for me? He, kiss. This is the reply from Ashleigh. Okay, babe, and no he doesn't, laugh out loud, as in meet her mum. And it's okay, haha. What car has he got? And you will have to wait and see, won't you? Winky face. Kiss, kiss. Ashleigh waited by the window for Pete's dad to arrive. When he did, she quickly texted Pete and said, your dad's here, I'm on my way, or something to that effect. And she shouted up to her mum goodbye, she was going, and then she got into the dark blue Ford Mondeo and she was never ever seen alive again. The next day at lunchtime, Ashleigh didn't come home. As I said, she was a very good, nice, kind, lovely girl. She was always sticking to the rules. She always came home when her mum had asked her to. So it was out of character that she didn't come home when she'd been asked to. Her mum texted her, no reply. She just tried to think, oh, you know, she must be caught up having fun with her friend. And then she just continued to worry and the day went on. As the day went on, she just kept on texting, kept on ringing Ashleigh. She started to worry and the panic set in, as it would. She got no reply from Ashleigh ever. No answer, no text. This is when, after a little while, she contacted Ashleigh's friends and she was like, you know, whose friend has she gone round to? Like, who knows where she is? And this is when her college friends would tell her mum that she was actually meeting a boy that night. And that is when true panic must have set in. That is when Ashleigh's mum went onto her Facebook account to try and find like who this guy was, who was she meeting, and she couldn't really see much. They'd never communicated on Facebook, so he was a friend of hers, but they were never like commenting on each other's posts and things like that. I'm gonna wet myself, that's annoying. Oh, I just slightly need a wee. I'll push through. No toilet in the shed. What was I saying? Yeah, no communication through comments on Facebook, on each other's pages. No. So they had, like I said, they'd been communicating through Messenger. Ashleigh's mum continued to ring Ashleigh's phone. She carried on. Andrea. Ashleigh's mum is called Andrea. And it was on the 30th call that somebody picked up, and it wasn't Ashleigh. And it is worst case scenario. It was actually a police officer. They answered the phone to Andrea and on that freaking phone call informed her that they had found Ashleigh's body. Can you imagine that? It's a bizarro way that Ashleigh was found and discovered. It is an odd way. Where to begin? Ashleigh's body was found in a field near a lay-by behind a hedge, sort of partly in a hedge. She was fully clothed when her body was found, but she had been raped and her cause of death would later come back as suffocation. Now, nobody just happened to stumble upon Ashleigh's body. No. And Ashleigh hadn't been reported missing. No. So what happened? How did they find Ashleigh? Well, I'm going to tell you. Her killer actually confessed. How often does that happen? But he did. On Tuesday the 27th of October, a man was arrested for minor traffic offences. They'd been trying to get him for a while and they couldn't, and then his registration plate was like picked up, so they went and they arrested him. They were like, you know, we've got these charges against you, and they arrested his ass. Took him back to the police station. When he was in this police station in a holding cell, and I imagine that they told him why he'd been arrested for these traffic offences, but he must have been sitting in that cell sweating, and he knew that they hadn't found Ashleigh's body. He knew that, but he couldn't control himself. He couldn't hold it in any longer, and he called a prison guard over and he said, I've killed somebody. I killed somebody last night and I need to talk to the CID, which is the Criminal Investigation Unit Department, I think. The guard's like, whoa, stop talking. I need to take you to the front desk and you need to say all of that shit again where I can have it recorded. Ed, thank you, please. So he walks him to the front desk, because there's all cameras there, isn't there? I bet you see some amazing footage from those cameras. So he takes him to the front desk and he says, please relay what you just told me in the cell to this lovely lady at the desk. And he's just like, I killed someone last night and I need to confess, I need to talk to the CID and I need to tell you where her body is. And then, as if just, what? The lady behind the desk is like, sorry, it's not funny, but the lady behind the desk is like, and she repeats it back to him. So you killed somebody last night. You're telling me you killed somebody last night. You want to confess and you need to tell us where the body is. Is that right? And he's like, yeah. You know, they need, they're like, yeah, we, sure? Okay. You said it. And he said it twice. Everyone heard you. Who is this glorious human, I hear you ask? Peter Chapman, 32. Homeless drifter that frequented that sort of area. Kind of a wide area up north, but mainly centering like Darlington. Turns out Darlington was actually where he was born, and he sort of gravitated back towards there to be a terrible person. The police decided to take Peter Chapman up on his offer of showing them where Ashleigh's body was, and he did. They took him in the car and he directed them to Ashleigh. This is obviously when they knew, like, oh, he is telling the truth. He is not just a nut job. Well, he's not that sort of nut job. He's that sort of nut job. So they then take him back to the police station for formal interviewing and set up a crime scene where poor Ashleigh's body had been found. In his interview, he just divulged everything, really. Everything. He had been grooming Ashleigh from the beginning. He told her that he was DJ Peter Cartwright, and that he was 17 years old. He'd formed this relationship, and it's just a lot of effort really went into this process. He'd bought, bearing in mind he's homeless, although he had ways of raising money naughtily, he purchased a second phone so that he could text Ashleigh as Pete's dad, him. So he'd gone through a whole process. I mean, it's so, what is the word? What's that word? Well, this happens every week. Like, not delusional, frick and frack. Deceitful. It's so deceitful, isn't it? Just lie after lie, and just knowing, it's sick knowing that on the other side of that, he's like a 32-year-old man just hatching a little plan that's just grim, disgusting. It's horrible. It sends shivers down my spine. Grooming her for weeks. Piece of shit. This wasn't the first time. Ashleigh was not the first time, no. And we don't really know how many times he'd done this or tried this before to meet up with a younger girl. A few weeks before Ashleigh, he had tried to meet up with a teenager in Middlesbrough. And for some reason, I couldn't really find out what happened there, but for some reason that all failed and he didn't end up meeting with her. And then 2 weeks before Ashleigh's murder, Chapman had been grooming another girl who was 15 years old, and they had arranged to meet at a B&Q car park. Classy. When she arrived and went, near the car that he described that he would be in, clearly wasn't Mr. Fitty 17-year-old DJ Pete, but a balding 32-year-old man. Well, she just fucked right off, as you would. This is when he realised that his plans were never going to work, because he just was like, well, then the minute they see me, they're going to realise that I'm not 17-year-old DJ Pete and they're going to run for the hills. So that's when he came up with this whole horrible story about Pete's dad, and that, he would have to come and collect Ashleigh. And just horribly, it worked. And Ashleigh got in the car with the person that she thought was Pete's dad, and it wasn't. It was this monstrous Pete Chapman. Chapman would tell the police what happened that day. He drove the car. Who knows what happened in that time? Did he tell her straight away that he wasn't Pete's dad? I honestly don't know how long he would have played along with that, but at some point they got to this lay-by near this big field where Ashleigh's body was discovered, and he pulled over and he forced Ashleigh out of the car. And this is when, obviously, no matter what, she would have realised at this point that this wasn't right and that this was dangerous, and probably was really very frightened. He taped her hands, he taped her feet, and he made her perform oral sex on him. Piece of shite. He then put tape around her mouth to stop her from being able to shout or scream, and he raped her. He then cut the tape on her hands and freed her hands and told her to pull up her own clothes. And then he tied her wrists up again. And then he got the duct tape and he put it around her head. He used the entire roll of duct tape until she couldn't get any air. So he suffocated her by just wrapping her head in duct tape. There are literally no words for that. Afterwards, when Ashleigh had sadly passed away, he then cut all of the tape from her body. So he cut her tape, like when she was discovered, when he took them to her, she had no tape on her. So he'd cut all of the tape off of her. Maybe he was planning on trying to flee and get away, and he didn't want any evidence of the tape and his fingerprints. I'm not sure, but he did. He removed all of the tape from Ashleigh's body. He said that he murdered Ashleigh because she reminded him so much of his ex-girlfriend, and he was infuriated and enraged, and they had an argument, and this made him kill her. An argument about what? The only argument that I can see happening is like, what the fuck are you doing? Who are you? Where are we going? Like, you know, that's not an argument, is it? God knows. I think that's all a load of cod shit, but I wasn't there. He clearly had a game plan to get a young girl into his car and do horrible things. Thank God he was arrested that day. Thank God he was arrested that day for these minor traffic offences, because he was actually on his way to meet another 15-year-old girl in Middlesbrough that day. And how would that have panned out? How would that have ended? I don't know. But, you know, for her, thank the Lord that he had been arrested. If he was planning to just get away with this, he hadn't done a very good job so far. They searched his car, and in his car was Ashleigh's overnight bag, Ashleigh's phone, and all of the duct tape that he had removed from her body, along with the empty sort of inner tube, and that's how they know that he'd used the whole duct tape. They searched his laptop as well, which was stolen. Stolen laptop. Wouldn't think anything else, would you? And it turns out that his 3,000 friends on his DJ Pete Facebook page were all girls between the ages of 13 and 17. Nearly all of them were added on the day that he started to talk to Ashleigh. Police, they found many indecent images of teenage girls and young women on that laptop, many of which were girls that he'd been grooming, basically. He was grooming them. They thought he was this 17-year-old hunk, and they were sending him like dirty pictures of themselves because they were like, oh, he's amazing. Along with that, they also found a lot of messages between himself and teenage girls, many of which they were arranging to meet up. So, you know, it's just, it blows your mind. It's just scary and deceitful and just horrible. And these people do really freaking exist. And it's just a brief chat about Peter Chapman. He was raised by his grandparents in Stockton-on-Tees, which is near Darlington. His classmates would describe him as weird and a loner. He was just a very odd character. At 15, he experienced his first encounter with the police. Naughty boy. He was accused of sexual assault at 15. At 19, he was accused of rape. Okay, so progressing. Both of these cases were dropped. I'm not sure whether by the victims or the court, you know, if they didn't have enough evidence, but they were dropped. However, when he was 19, he did get a prison sentence for two rapes of sex workers, and makes you wonder what happened in that car journey with Ashleigh. It seems like he likes the feeling of the fear in his victims. In both of the rapes that he served prison time for, he followed a similar pattern, and both of those involved holding the women at knife point and tormenting them on the journey, you know, driving round to wherever he was going to rape them. He would kidnap them, threaten them with the knife, drive around, tape them up, and then rape them with a knife to their throat and say that if they moved or screamed or tried to get away, he would cut their throat. Pleasant. When he had finished his attack, he would then rob both of his victims. These attacks happened 2 days apart. 2 days apart. And that's why I say thank the Lord that he was arrested on those traffic offences when he, you know, the day that he was after he'd murdered Ashleigh, because he was on his way to see somebody else. And these 2 attacks, like he probably likely would have gone on to, it just doesn't bear thinking about. It was the second victim of these rapes when he was 19, where the sex worker, she was 24 years old, and she would testify and say that when they were driving, he was tormenting her and he was telling her what he'd done to the previous rape victim and that he was going to do the same to her. And she feared for her life. She just thought, I'm not going to get out of this alive. All of this went on in a stolen vehicle as well. All sorts of wrong, innit? Now this blows my tiny mind because he was given 7 years. Okay, I think that's quite a small amount of time. 7 years for rape with a weapon at knife point, robbery as well, stolen car, lots of layers, isn't it? You know, is this person probably quite dangerous? Yes, I think they are. 7 years just seemed low. But what do I know? It seemed low. He only actually served half of that. So in 3.5 years, he was out again. Out again. He was put on the sex offenders register, say that quick, but very quickly he went under that radar. He was gone. He was not monitored for 8 years. He was homeless, he had no fixed abode, and there's more to that, but I'll come back to that. He was never really checked on. In 2002, he moved to Liverpool with a girlfriend and her young son. But when she found out that he was on the sex offender register, she freaked out, as you would probably, and she was like, oh no, and she kicked him out. That is when he started living in his car, and he would like steal things, he would rob things to survive for petrol money, food and things like that. So that was his life in 2002. In 2003, he was arrested again on suspicion of the knife point rape of 2 more sex workers. So he's just going round he was arrested at this point. So although he's gone under the radar, where is he? He got arrested, so they did know where he was. You know, they knew what he'd done before. He was on the sex offender register anyway. It makes me cross. And again, these 2 cases were dropped. In 2004, he served 1.5 years in prison for breaking the rules of being on the sex offender register. One of the rules is that you have to say to the police or the people that are monitoring you, if they're freaking monitoring you, that you've moved or that you've gone somewhere else. And it became apparent to the police that he hadn't done so, because he was just driving about all over the place in his car. He didn't have an address. So they were like, 1.5 years in prison. Wouldn't you think that rather than 1.5 years in prison breaking those rules, or should we try and get a bit of evidence? Should we prosecute him for the rape of these 2? I mean, I don't know why those cases were dropped, whether it was evidence-based or whether those sex workers didn't press charges. So I don't know. But 1.5 years. Maybe they were just like, look, we've got nothing else on him, so shove him in for that. And that's what they did. He was just such a piece of work. At one point, and this angers me beyond belief, he's on the sex offenders register, and he managed to enrol in an IT course that was run at a school. Right. At one point, he had another girlfriend, moved in with her, and had an argument with a neighbour. And very quickly after that, their house was set on fire. What? He, of course, went on the run, and there was a warrant out for him in conjunction with this arson, this house fire, but I couldn't find that anything came from that. But, obviously it got worse because he then murdered somebody. But just, yeah, am I painting a picture of this dude? I hope so. On March the 8th in 2010, he pleaded guilty to murdering Ashleigh. He received a life sentence with a minimum of 35 years. That's one of the longest, biggest sentences I've heard of. So, yeah, I mean, he was clearly dangerous, wasn't he? Oh, in fact, I think the judge actually said, quote, that he was a great danger to women. And that seems mighty true, doesn't it? Women, though, how about girls? In prison, he wrote letters to a friend. And this is where some information came out about the murder of Ashleigh as well. And in those letters, he wrote about how boring it was, how boring it is in prison. Oh, cry me a freaking river. No PlayStations. Shush. Only got a few channels on the TV. Boring. Freaking good. In these letters as well, he confessed again. He'd already confessed, but, the more the better. He confessed to the murder of Ashleigh. And he said again about Ashleigh reminding him of his ex-girlfriend. He didn't say which one, but he just said that her demeanour and her attitude and everything reminded him so much of this ex, and that's why he murdered her. He said they had a similar personality. So before, when he'd said about an argument, I was like, bullshit argument. No. She was probably just scared the hell for her life. What are you arguing about? But in the letter, it makes it seem a bit more like, for some reason, he saw something in Ashleigh that really triggered him, and he said she had this similar sort of vibe and personality to this ex that he hated, and that's why it progressed from rape to murder, because he had been convicted. He had raped these sex workers in the past. That possibly was his usual, that was his usual MO, that he would rape people at knife point. Then nothing to say that wasn't going to be the case. It was almost like in these letters he was saying, well, that's what I was planning, but then she reminded me so much of my ex and I just got filled with rage. So he said he taped her mouth and then just kept taping to shut her up. So I mean, it's awful, it's horrible, but that was his explanation. Just pausing while people chat. Bear with me. Ashleigh's funeral was attended by hundreds and hundreds of people. It showed just how lovely and warm and kind she was, and what an awful, horrible waste of life it was, because she reminded him a bit of his ex. I say deceitful, I've said deceitful throughout this video, but it's just predatory, isn't it? It just doesn't sit right at all. As you can imagine, there was a lot of anger towards the police because, this was a very, and I have covered cases like this before where you're like, you knew the risk here and what happened, It's just the police admitted that there were many, many faults in how this case previously to Ashleigh's murder had been handled. Many places where things had just really fallen short. They claimed that this was due to inadequate resources and a lack of funding, and that is, it's the world we do live in, unfortunately. There's just never enough money, never enough funding, never enough resources in so many areas, not just policing, but in healthcare, teaching, special needs families and children, adults, mental health. And it is just generally really frustrating, especially when things slip through the cracks. He was clearly dangerous. Ashleigh's mum, Andrea, she tried to sue the police department or various departments for what happened because it was just masses of errors on their part that led to this outcome. He just was completely unmonitored, completely. So she was suing for their incompetence, basically. And can you believe it? I feel like I say that all the freaking time, but can you believe it? That she was turned down compensation because she didn't actually witness with her eyes the murder of her child. She didn't actually witness it with her eyes. Therefore, oh boo-hoo. She didn't witness the murder of her child with her eyes. She didn't have to see her child's body at the crime scene or anything like that. Therefore, no compensation. I'm really sorry. That's just bullshit. I just don't even I don't even understand that. Okay, Facebook put out a statement to just say anyone under the age of 18 shouldn't meet somebody off of the internet, and they released some guidelines. Get this down me. A group of Ashleigh's college friends set up a thing called like Ashleigh's Rules, and I've got them. I'm going to share them with you in a minute, or some of them. I'll share it in the description box as well. And these rules were handed out to every child in Darlington at around the time that they were created, and I'll share them. You can never get enough internet safety. Never enough. Because also, I was going to say, I think that cases like this are really important to cover. Really important, because it might seem scary, it might seem horrific, and yes, you could maybe doctor exactly what happened to Ashleigh, to the age of the child or what have you, but these things really happen. Like this happened. Ashleigh is a real person. Her real mum lost her daughter. This really happened. This isn't a fictional story, it's real. So to cover cases like this, I think, is important. It's just getting that information out there for young people. Like, this shit happens. Here are the rules. Rule number 1. If ever meeting up with somebody who is alien to you or your friends, make sure that you meet them in a group of at least 2 to 3 and in public, well-lit and populated areas. Great rule. 2. Inform somebody of where you are going and what time you should be back. Also, the name of who you are meeting. Again, good rule. I'm going to print these off for my kids. 3. Don't accept anyone on social networking sites that you don't know. That's a good one. That is a good one. Because kids are so trusting. So trusting. Remember never to trust anyone who you have met online. How funny that I just said that. You don't know what they're capable of doing, and you don't know who they really are. You honestly don't. 5. Never tell a stranger on network sites or chat rooms anything personal about yourself, where you live, date of birth, etc. 6. Final one. Never meet anyone you don't know. Simple as! Exclamation. Love that. What a good thing to make. Nice and simple. 6 rules. And so that concludes this week's story. Heartbreaking, tragic, frustrating. If you have young teenagers in the house, I would highly suggest sharing Ashleigh's rules, actually, because I think they're really good rules to have to keep you safe from strangers and to keep you safe online. I'm going to share them in my description box down below. Thank you so much for joining me for another story this week. I hope you can join me next week. By the way, what a fabulous vessel for my gin this week. It's, has that got a sir? Yeah. Sir. For Sophie, Sin and Tonic. Super. Special. Smiley. Oh, I've cracked myself up. Oh, it's really going to my head this week. As I was saying, hope you can join me next week for another true crime story and a really special mug or jug or vase or bucket of gin. Be safe, share Ashleigh's rules, and I'll see you next week. Love you. Bye.